Good morning, this is Ian King Live, an hour of business and economic news from the heart of the city. Now, the government says it plans to make property developers foot the bill to replace dangerous cladding on buildings to take the burden off leaseholders. The Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, has told developers they need to agree a £4 billion plan to fix the cladding on low-rise flats within 2 months, or risk new laws being brought in which would force them to act. Well, it's had an immediate impact on the share prices of the UK's major house builders. Persimmon, Barratt, Berkeley Homes and Taylor Wimpey all saw falls this morning. Well, I've been speaking to the executive chairman of the Home Builders Federation, Stewart, and asked him why he thinks the government is singling out his members.
I think that you have to look at this in the context of what we've already done. First of all, the major home builders that my organisation represents, the household names that you'll be familiar with and everybody's familiar with, have already set aside or committed or spent something close to £1 billion, going back, looking at buildings that they've been responsible for over many, many years, whether those buildings were above 18 metres or, frankly, in the 11 to 18 metre category that we're talking about today. And they've done that because they felt it was the right thing to do. And secondly, of course, the government's also introduced the residential property development tax, which comes in from this April, is effectively a corporation tax surcharge levied at 4% on profits over 25 million. And that is going to collect something around 200 million a year, 2 billion over 10 years. There's no offset for the companies that have spent the billion against the corporation tax surcharge. So we feel that, first of all, we feel it's absolutely right that leaseholders shouldn't pay. I think the scheme put forward by the previous Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, a year ago, I never felt was a scheme that was likely to gain traction or work. This concept of leaseholders in these 11 to 18 metre building height range having to borrow money and then pay it back was never a starter in my view. So I think it's absolutely right that leaseholders shouldn't pay. I do think we need clarity. The government is right to seek clarity. But I don't think it should all fall on the home builders, because I think there are many other characters, many other companies, some of whom the Secretary of State has talked about, in particular building material suppliers, but also others that have to play their part as well. And I look forward to having constructive discussions with Michael Gove and with the government over the next few weeks as we seek to find a sensible solution to this.
As things stand, will your members be building fewer homes as a result of these proposals?
It's a very difficult question to answer, Ian, because we don't yet know exactly how this is going to play out. Obviously, the monies I've already spoken about are, if you will, accounted for. But look, it's a fact of life that if you spend $1 billion or $2 billion, or now talk of a further $4 billion, and I think there's a bit of work to be done to ascertain whether the $4 billion that is being talked about today is right or not. It strikes me potentially that it might be a little high. I know others think it's not, but it strikes me in the context of what I know about that it may be a little high. But that aside, you cannot take £2 or £3 billion out of house building coffers and not expect that to come from the investment they would have made in land. And of course, once they invest in land, that is how they grow housing output. So I don't think it's material. I don't think it's going to have a massive impact on housing output over the next year or two. But whatever money you divert from investment in future land, by definition, will have an impact down the road.
Some people would say, well, hang on, the sector has enjoyed super profits as a result of the government's Home to Help to Buy scheme. I mean, it paid out something like £2.5 billion worth of dividends in 2019, the last year before the pandemic. It's only fair that you should pay up a bit more, isn't it?
Well, I repeat, I think we've already paid a pretty fair share off our own back in terms of the $1 billion or thereabouts that we've set aside or committed and already spent, and the $2 billion that we will be paying over the next 10 years by way of the residential property developer tax. So I think ultimately, to me, I'm not denying that home builders have a role to play here, and certainly we do, and we've accepted that throughout. It's about making sure it's fair, it's proportionate, and that everybody that's been involved in this process is captured by it, not just the large home builders.
Is there a case for saying that all of this cladding actually needs to be replaced? I mean, I've seen it suggested that the government is being overzealous and gold-plating safety regulations post-Grenfell.
I think there's been an inevitable, look, Grenfell was obviously a tragedy that none of us ever want to see repeated, and rightly so. The question is, to what extent are buildings the length and breadth of the country at danger from cladding or indeed catching fire? And the evidence is that there's not a great deal of evidence that buildings do catch fire, as you all know. And I think there has been potentially an overreaction by with some of the interventions the government's made, particularly in terms of how they've indicated the surveyors and the lenders and the insurers should look at this, that all buildings of all shapes and sizes are being potentially captured when they're probably out of scope. And I do think there is some common sense in narrowing down the scope of the discussion so that it focuses on the buildings where they are at greatest risk, and clearly those that have anything like the cladding that was on the Grenfell Tower building have to be dealt with quickly, and it's important that they are.